Hey guys, it's Vignesh from Code Android. In this series, we'll see how to create a basic to-do list application in Android. This is a part 2 video of this series. In this video, we'll see the database design required for this application. In last tutorial, we have created the app and designed the splash screen. Now, we'll design the dashboard activity. In the layout file of dashboard activity, changing the root layout as relative layout. Inside, adding the toolbar with width as match parent and height as Android at action bar size. Setting the background as color primary dark. To display the task, we need a recycler view. So let's include the recycler view library. For Fab button, we need design library, so I'm implementing that as well. Adding a recycler view with width as match parent and height as match parent. Also assigning ID for the recycler view as rv_dashboard. Adding a Fab button with width as wrap content and height as wrap content, and making it align parent bottom true. Also setting align parent right and align parent end as true. I want some gap between the screen and Fab button, so adding margin as 16 dp. For source, we need plus icon, so I'm copying the XML resource inside the drawable folder. Adding the source as plus. I want the Fab button color as green, so I'm setting the background tint as color primary dark. Also assigning ID as Fab dashboard, so we can access it from Kotlin. Now we'll see the database design. For storing to-do list name, creating a table called to-do. For each task, we will have multiple subtasks. So to store subtask, I have created a new table called to-do item, where linking to-do table using to-do ID. Also storing item name and completed status. This created at field is added for debugging purpose. Using DB Designer, we can create the database structure and export as queries. Before using the query, we need to check the query. To check that, go to SQLiteOnline.com. Here we have only one table. Now replace the query and run it. You can see the table got created, which means the query doesn't have any problem. Creating the database handler file called dbhandler. Inside, creating a class called dbhandler which extends SQLite OpenHelper. Inside, we need to pass 4 parameters: context, database name, cursor factory and db version. First, we create a new file for storing the constant. I am naming the file as const. This is the query we are going to execute, so I am storing all the column names into constant variables. Also, we need database name and database version, so I'm storing those data as well into constant. Now we stored all the required values inside constant file, so we can access those variables from anywhere in our project. We need context for SQLite OpenHelper, so I'm taking context as a parameter for dbhandler class. Then passing database name, null and database version. We need to implement onCreate and onUpdate methods, so I'm implementing those. Creating a value called createToDoTable to store to-do tables create query. creating another variable called create to do item table to store to do item tables create query. Instead of using the hard-coded column names, we'll take it from constant file. Removing \n characters to avoid the confusions. To store current time on created at field, adding default as current timestamp. Let's try the query once. Here I am changing the table name as to do one. You can see the table got created, which means query is working fine. Now we need to execute these queries. To do that, calling execute SQL method inside passing create queries. Here database object is nullable, so I am removing nullable here. We need structure for task and subtask, so creating a package called DTO, inside creating new Kotlin files called todo and todo item. Creating a class called todo, inside creating a value called id for storing primary key and initializing it with -1. Creating another value called name for storing the task name. For storing the subtask, creating an array list called items, which is a type of mutable list of to-do item. We don't have to-do item class yet, so let's add the class inside to-do item file. Here we need id for storing primary key, to-do id for storing the parent task id, item name for storing subtask name, is completed for storing the status. Giving the class name here and assigning it with empty array list. We have completed the DTO class. Now we need to insert the task from dashboard activity using DB handler. Creating a function called add to do inside passing to do object as parameter. Here we are going to insert the data, so I'm getting the writable database. Creating a content values and putting column name inside it. We are not going to insert anything, so I'm calling db.insert. Inside passing table name, null and content values. Adding the return type as boolean so that we can give the insertion status to calling class. Returning true when result is not equal to -1, otherwise returning false. Now we need to get the list of items. So creating another function called getToDos and setting its return type as mutable list of to do. To store the to do items, creating a mutable list and returning it. Now we are going to read the data, so I'm getting the readable database. Using raw query method, getting all the records from table to do. After using the raw query result, we need to close it, so calling close on query result. Here we need to read the data from query result. If query result.move to first is true, then we have some data inside it. So we need to read the data and create the to-do list. Using do while loop, reading all the data from query result. Inside, creating a to-do object for storing the data. Getting the id value from query result by calling getLong method. Inside we need to pass column index. We don't know the column index. To get that I'm using getColumnIndex method. Similarly, getting the task name from query result and storing it into name variable. Now we'll add the object inside mutable list. In dashboard activity, we have a recycler view where we need to display the task, and on click of the Fab button, we need to add the task. First, we'll add the task. To do that, setting onClick listener for the Fab button. Inside, I want to show a custom dialog for adding the task. So, I'm creating a new layout file called dialog dashboard. Inside the layout file, changing the root layout as relative layout and adding text view with width as match parent and height as wrap content. Also assigning the ID as TV to do. Inside onClick listener, creating an alert dialog builder. Inflating the layout file and storing it into a value called view. Now we need to access the edit text from this view object. Value to do name equals to view.findViewById is a type of edit text. Sorry, I have added the text view instead of edit text, so I am changing this text view to edit text and assigning ID as et_to_do. We'll add the positive button for the dialog. I am giving the text as add. In the listener, we are not going to use dialog interface and integer, so I am giving underscore as a parameter name. Inside the listener, we need to add the item into database. For that, we need the database object. Let init var dbHandler is a type of DB handler. Let's initialize this inside onCreate. Inside positive button, I am checking the edit text. If the edit text is not empty, then we need to add the item into database using add_to_do method. For this method, we need to pass to-do object. So creating a to-do object called to-do. Inside, setting name which is entered on the edit text. Finally, passing the to-do object as a parameter for add_to_do. We'll add the negative button. Here I'm passing the text as cancel. Finally calling show method. After adding the item, we need to refresh the recycler view. First, we'll create the adapter for the recycler view. Class dashboard adapter which extends recyclerView.adapter. Inside we need to pass the view holder. I'm going to create the view holder inside itself. Class view holder which extends recyclerView.viewHolder. We need to pass a view as an argument, so I'm adding view as a parameter. Let's pass this view holder for our adapter. Now we need to override these three methods. In getItemCount method, we need to return recycler view size. So I'm adding context and mutable list as a parameter for the adapter. Here returning the list size. For recycler view, we need to have a child layout. So creating a new layout file called rv_child_dashboard. Here also I am changing the root layout as relative layout and adding a text view with width as match parent and height as wrap content. Adding padding as 16 dp and assigning ID as TV to do name. Inside onCreate view holder, we need to return the view holder. For this view holder, we need to pass the view. So using layout inflator, inflating the layout file and passing it for the view. Inside onBind view holder method, we will get the view holder. I am renaming the view holder as holder. From list, getting p1th item's name and setting it as a text for to do name. Now we need to set the adapter for the recycler view. Before that, we need to set layout manager for the recycler view. I am setting the layout manager as linear layout manager. For refreshing the list, I am creating a method called refresh list. Inside, setting the adapter for the recycler view with dashboard adapter by passing context and dbHandler.getToDos. We need to call this method once we add an item. Also, we need to call this method on onResume so that while opening the application, we will get the list. Sorry, I forgot to set the view for the dialog. So, setting the view for the dialog. Also, I want to set the toolbar title. To do that, adding the ID for the toolbar as dashboard toolbar. Now, setting support action bar as dashboard toolbar. After that, setting the title as dashboard. Now we'll launch the application. You can see we got the title, but the text is in black color. We'll fix it in a moment. Let's add an item and see what is happening. You can see the task name is coming above the toolbar. Let's align the recycler view first. Recycler view should be below our toolbar, so setting layout below as dashboard toolbar. Also, I want to change the toolbar color, so I'm setting the toolbar theme as theme overlay dot app compact dot dark dot action bar. Because of dark action bar, the text will come in white color. Now we'll launch the application. You can see the toolbar text is coming in white color. Also, the recycler view is starting below the toolbar. In next tutorial, we'll see how to add the subtask. That's all for this video, guys. If you want to support me, you can do that by becoming a patron at patreon.com/codeandroid. Hope you like it. I will see you in my next video. Have a nice day.